So this is literacy plus computational thinking plus computer science equals integrated programming. So really, how can we use computational thinking and literacy to get to some of those computer science topics? We're going to work through. I'm Janelle Thompson. I am a literacy consultant with Heartland AEA, but I am also on the computer science team at Heartland AEA. And with the new computer science standards coming out, every AEA has a computer science team. So if you need some support or assistance in that computer science area with the new standards that are being implemented in the next 2 years, please get a hold of your AEA with the computer science team. Marisa Dahl is an instructional technologist, digital learning consultant at Heartland as well. She is also on the computer science team. She may be joining us here at some time as we go through here. But we're going to go through and learn a little bit about what this might be. Our agenda is to talk about vocabulary. That's going to be one of the biggest topics we're going to have. And then we're going to talk about computational thinking and how that aligns with literacy. And I'm going to give you some examples of some book integrations that we can have, and then action steps and maybe some share outs if we have time. So how can books be the foundation for computational thinking and learning of computer science? Big question, right? And computational thinking and computer science and coding actually goes along with computational thinking, science, and math. There's lots of overlap there, right? We not having much problem with decomposing what's happening in a math problem or decomposing what's happening in a science experiment, decomposing what our code is, right? So lots of connections there. But we also, there's Marisa, we also can think about pattern recognition and abstraction in the area of literacy. So we have patterns in our phonics, right? We have patterns in coding. We have patterns in math, right? Patterns in science and history. Abstraction, taking out unnecessary information, can go with editing, right? In our writing, we're taking out extraneous information that we don't really need, that the reader might confuse the reader. So lots of the vocabulary, as you see, pattern recognition, abstraction, decomposition, is the same. So if we focus on some of those vocabulary words, we can then teach multiple different places, multiple different contents for our students. So literacy and computational thinking with the computer science connection. Computer science and literacy has these things in common. So in the pink is computer science topics, and in the green is some of the literacy concepts, right? Story structure stuff is definitely literacy. Story events and challenges, how a character changes over time, right, is one of the standards. Compare and contrast is along the lines of decomposition, right? What goes in this category, what goes in this category? We have to decide and decompose the two pieces. But steps in a routine, if-then statements, and breaking problems down is all things that are computational thinking. So lots of connections between computer science, literacy, and computational thinking. Here's what it looks like for foundational skills, because a lot of times I have administrators and teachers say, well, that doesn't work for K2. But if you think about inferencing and models, we can talk about spoken words, right? So kids can understand spoken language a lot sooner than they can understand reading. So they have to infer what you are meaning. And kids as early as 1 and 2 years old, even at 6 months old, they smile at you when you give them a goofy face, right? They're inferring that you're trying to make them smile. So syllables and sounds are models as well. Patterns and recognition and sorting is all with phonics and decoding. So we are sorting words that have the short O sound or short A sound. Same thing as we're sorting patterns and recognizing patterns in some coding. Decomposing, spoken words, taking apart syllables. So we know how to spell syllable by syllable, how to pronounce syllable by syllable, how to break a word apart by syllables. Encoding, which is spelling. So taking those syllables and figuring out what the sounds are in each syllable to create a multisyllabic word are all part of decomposing. I'm taking the word apart by syllable, then I'm taking the syllable apart by sound. so that I can write the actual letters that represent those sounds, making that pattern. So there are many, many, many connections between computational thinking, computer science, and literacy. So I told you we're going to talk about vocabulary, one of the biggest things that we have in there. Whoops. Literacy is on the left and computer science is on the right. They both have representation in there. In computer science, we might be using blocks and actions. And in literacy, we're going to use letters and sounds. We have a story structure. We have a pattern, right, that we're going to follow when we are writing a story or we're following a story. And in computer science, it's an algorithm. Sequencing, first, then, next, last. And in computer science, it's conditionals, if-then statements. And we have a great text that are going to share some connections here later. Compare and contrast is decomposing. We already talked about that. Revise and editing. You're debugging something. You're abstracting extraneous information. And then encoding is the same as algorithmic cipher, right? I have to spell things correctly to be understood. You have to have the correct algorithmic cipher to be understood when you're coding something. And then repetition, we see that a lot in text. In novels, you see it a lot in picture books. Of course, you see it in poetry, and you're going to see it in music, right? Lots of repetition. Things happen over and over again. You're going to see repetition in social studies too. And in computer science, it's those loops. Okay, we're going to do it again. We're going to do this again, right? We call those loops. So if instead of always calling it repetition, I say, we're going to make a loop, or we're going to debug this, or we're going to decompose these two concepts and figure out which ones are the same. So trying to overlap your language that way and building the students' vocabularies are going to help them in the long run, because they can use those vocabulary words in multiple areas then. All right, so I'm glad Marisa's here. You want to talk about these word cards that we have?
Yeah, so I know that Janelle has gone through some really great vocabulary words, and some of you are like, I have no idea what that means. Like, I could not describe that word. Believe me, all of us, both of us were there. And so we had actually worked with the district to look through some vocabulary words that they wanted us to be consistent on K-5. And so what we created is some word wall words, or sorry, it's not word wall. We wanted them called vocabulary cards. We would like to be move away from word walls and sound words, but we wanted these to be vocabulary words around each of the vocabulary words that we found either in code.org or the CSTA website. And so when you click on that link for word wall words, what you're going to find is a list of 70. Oh, I can't remember all of a sudden. Yeah, can you click on the perfect? So if you scroll down a little bit to like abstraction, right there. So where you're going to see, like, there's one on the top that's a very much K2 definition, but then on the bottom might be more for 3-5. That's not for every word. That's for some very basic ones that we think that you're going to use in the K2 level, but then maybe even progress a little bit later. So each if you get these printed at Heartland, we have them in our in the catalog. They actually print 3 sets for $10 because they're like, Boolean would be 3 times. So 3 sets for $10 are on a card stock, but you can get them printed at any AEA, or we gave you the PDF that you can also download and print yourself. But does it say how many pages? 73. So I think there's about 70 or so words here that you can use this in your classroom. And honestly, when we created these, this was a learning process for us too. And so a lot of times the words are for us to learn what they are, and then we can use that consistent language with kids.
Perfect. Again, here is the link to that PDF. So if you want to print your own, they are there for you, but you want that high quality paper. It's kind of nice to get them from the AEA. Or if you have your own print shop, send them to the print shop and get those printed for you. The other resource that we have for you is a computer science vocabulary practice activity flip book. So this, again, you can get from Heartland AEA. It's bound at the top. You can just flip through it. But these are actually vocabulary activities that are research-based. Okay, these come from Isabel Beck's vocabulary activity research. Again, here's the PDF for that. So you can click here on this link it will take you to the vocabulary book. Again, you can print it yourself. It comes in color. I think it's orange if you get it printed. It tells you where it comes from, why it's important to teach these things. Here's the Isabel Beck things that are in there. And these are the different types of vocabulary activities that are in here and what page you can find those on. So an example, non-example activity around vocabulary and computer science would be something like this. If I say something, these are all oral. So you're going to just do these oral activities with your students. So maybe before you line up, before class starts, bell ringer type of thing. Anytime you have some extra time, you can do these oral activities around vocabulary words. So if I say something that sounds like automation, say automation. If not, don't say anything. So of course, your students are going to have to know what automation is. So you can explain automation quickly, or maybe you've already explained it to them and they should know this, but automation, and then you say a CAPTCHA, is that automation or not? And then if kids say it, don't say it, then you have those conversations. If I say something that sounds like a digital citizen, say digital citizen. If not, don't say anything. Think before you post. Sharing something that's inappropriate, not citing my sources for pictures. So these are different ways they can think about digital citizenship in context, right? By doing example, non-example. As you go down, there's different ones. Which one is an example of artificial intelligence? And they give you two options, and the kids turn and talk to a partner, or they can say it out loud as a whole group, however you, the teacher, want to determine that. But there's 23 pages of activities on here, multiple activities for each page. It gets into word association activities, lots of different things that are in here to help with developing vocabulary around computer science words. Okay. You can get these printed too. I think if you get them if you order one, it's more expensive than if you order two, like Marisa was saying. But they're super, super cheap to order and get. And if you say, there's no way anybody's going to buy these for me, Janelle, shoot me an email and I'll get you one. But there's a great little resource for you to easily add some vocabulary around computer science into your classroom. All right, so this is another text set that Marisa put together. Did you want to talk about it? You want to?
Yes, I can. So what we noticed is a lot of our teachers are library teachers, or our teachers that are in the library, media specialists, whatever they call themselves. They're like, I need, we are the ones that are supposed to be doing in computer science, but how do I do that? And so what I wanted to do is create a list of books, either from Epic or on Amazon, that would allow for you to hit those standards, but also provide a read aloud that students would enjoy. And so what I intentionally did is I found books for each content area. So if we know that networks in the internet, my kids, will never not get a whole lot of networks in the internet because, we are going to do X, Y, and Z instead. Maybe instead during my read aloud, I'll read one of those books then and have conversations around safe passwords and like where the internet came from and how the computer networks, how they all talk to each other. And so those are books that you can have access to. Epic Books is free for educators. And so you'll have those digital books for you to use. You also want to make sure that we're not always reading books about algorithm programming. So this gives you a little bit of a wide range of books for all concept areas.
All right, so thinking about books and how we're going to integrate text with computer science, because if you don't have a librarian, which a lot of people don't, or media specialists, you as an educator might be tasked with teaching the computer science standards, and how are you going to add that to your day? So we want to show you how you can integrate it with your literacy instruction already happening. So computational thinking connections, literacy connections, and computer science connections are listed here. And here's the standards that we are addressing in both computer science and in literacy. And then here's some of the instructional practices that we have for both computer science and literacy based on this text. It's called The Princess and the Pit Stop. This book is actually found on Mac and Via, and everyone has access to Mac and Via. Oh, goodness. Sorry. Everyone has access to Mac and Via. So here's The Princess and the Pit Stop, link to that text. But it's by, I had never heard of this book, but it's by Tom Engelberger. And I know Tom Engelberger, I know that author. I'm like, oh, this must be a really good book. And of course, I know Dan Sannett. he is an excellent author as well, or illustrator as well. And then right here, right here is a lesson plan example that I have. So if you click on that, you have access to this lesson. Here's the guiding questions. Here's the activity that we had, the vocabulary that we used, computer science standard that we used, ELA standard, and then we also included the social emotional learning competencies that you could address while you were teaching this as well. So this is a first grade lesson plan. We took this in. The Princess and the Pit Stop is a fairy tale. The first graders already learned about fairy tales. They could tell me tons of things about that. It was an Indy car, and of course they go round and round, and she has all sorts of characters, fairy tale characters. We played a little bingo game about how many characters we found, which is a loop, right? Because we're going round and round. How many times are we doing these things? Lots of great stuff that our kids can figure out. Then we use the indies. So this is a robot, right, Marissa? Is that what you'd call it? We use the indies, and they created their own loop, and they created their own story structure, and they had to figure out what each mat did. And we had a writing activity. So they had to figure it out, and they had to write what each mat did. And then they could create their own lesson and their own schedule for that. So it was really great because they had to listen to the story. They had an idea of what was going on. They had to do a writing activity. They had to work together. So we had that social emotional learning piece added. So lots of integrated pieces for these kids around computer science. We talked about the function. We talked about a root, all of the things that you might need to know in computer science as well. So Princess and the Pit Stop, lesson plan example right there. Bonus connections. There are also some social studies connections that you can have along with the fairy tales. They had a thing at the end where she wins and she's going to do something else, so we can do some inferencing about what the next book is going to be about. So some really great connections in Princess and the Pit Stop at that first grade level. The next one I'd love for Marissa to talk about.
Yes, I'm going to share a little bit more about Gus versus the Robot King. This is our third grade example of how we integrated some computational thinking, some literacy, and some CS connections. The first thing is abstraction. So under computational thinking's abstractions is trying to pick apart what information is needed. And then also thinking about the sequence and the loop of the conditionals. So we hit a lot with conditionals because what it is, it's a choose your own adventure book. So it has, oh, you went to the CS instruction. Oh, okay, here we go. Is that my book? There we go. So when we look at the book, what it does, and actually I took them to the office, so I don't have it right now, but I bought the book off Amazon, and you actually, many of you might even know some choose your own adventure books. I know Goosebumps has some too for those students who want harder reading or more scarier books. But what it does is it says, if you want Gus to go to this planet, go to page 16. If you like this idea and you want them to go here, go to this page. And so it has students choose choose the storyline of the book and choose the different endings. And so when we go through the book, we then do a lesson on creating your own choose your own adventure. And so there's a couple lesson templates. We want to click there with choose your own adventure template. Oh, yes. Nope. There. Yep. So this one, there's a choose your own adventure with a Google slide, and the other one is a Google digital lesson. But this one allows you students to have that template, and they draw a picture or whatever, and then they want to go to option one's going to take you here, but they have to describe where does option one, the conditional, if this, then this, or option two, if this, then this. And so it gives them a storybook template, storyboarding template to create your own adventure book after reading that one.
I love this because of the writing piece on it. And this makes kids actually have a higher level of thinking because they have to have these options, right? It's if and then. So some of you might be thinking, oh my gosh, so my kids have a hard enough time writing just a story without multiple options. But This gets them really excited. You give these books, read these books to the kids and let them play with these, choose their own adventure books for a while before you integrate this lesson, just independent books, right? In your time, they get so excited about writing their own, and inherently they want to do that higher order thinking. So yes, it's more difficult, but they all really go to the task, and pairing them with a partner actually helps with that writing piece too. So excellent writing skills, but then also, oh goodness, writing skills, but also some great partnering and SEL connections that you can have. All right, so this one, I love this book. It's definitely a larger text. Lots of different chapters in there. You have to read the whole book, but there are chapters in the book that are specific computer science topics or computational thinking topics. So the standards here, this is going to be for 5th grade. I think you could do this all the way to 9th grade, to be honest. But there's also a storytelling lesson plan that Marisa talked about. So if you click in here, the ultimate thing is that we would want them to be writing their own story, right? So this story lesson plan here is all written out for you. This is connected to Scratch. You probably all recognize this little Scratch cat that's on here. But it has the agenda highlights, and it will have personal narrative. It will have the different places that you can go, and it has a lesson plan in there. It has an example project. It has personal narrative solution sheet. I mean, all the graphic organizers and things that you could possibly want. What questions do they need to be asking themselves for this? What types of blocks did you use in your story when you use Scratch to create it? But they have to write it first and then code it in Scratch. So lots of great connections. So instead of just going to Scratch and coding things, having them actually write a plan out before they go in there, even if you don't use any text with it whatsoever, having them do some writing first is a great way. Okay, I need to do writer's workshop today. Oh gosh, could we do some writing before we get into Scratch and put our writing in with that computer science lesson instead of having yet another thing that we have to do in our 90 minutes, right? But this is a great way to go into and get that story telling lesson plan ready to go and some graphic organizers ready to go. Again, you want to hit with your vocabulary, comprehension, and again, that writing activity is what we want to have in here for sure, okay? So the lesson plan example that we have is the same one. I put them all on one. You see there's a 4th grade example in here too. We're not going to highlight that one today, but you can look at it at your leisure. So here's our guiding questions. And how do the chapters fit together to provide the overall structure explaining computer science concepts within the story? So I love this book because if we took out one chapter, it would change the entire story. So if I took out one of the computer science topics that they cover in this book, it's going to change the trajectory of the story. So it really gives kids a good deep dive into your standard about taking out a character, or how does a character change over time. This is like, how does the book change over time? How did the chapters go together? That's another standard that we have to be hitting before we can move on. So they can even take some abstraction. I'm taking this part out to see if it makes it better, right? So now we're analyzing as well, a lot more higher order thinking. It also talks about which characters are continuous and which are conditional. So I didn't say which ones are only in their part-time and which ones are full-time. I'm using those computer science standards, right? Those computer science vocabulary words, I mean. So there are some characters that go throughout the entire book, and there are a few characters that just show up here and there. If I took those characters out, would it change the trajectory of my story? Or could that still be told in some other way throughout the other chapters? So again, this is a great way to do literacy and computer science topics, because I'm organizing and presenting collected data. I'm collecting data on how often the characters are mentioned and used throughout the story. And then I'm comparing and contrasting those characters or the settings or the events in the story to see if it's going to make a difference, right? So great way to use both. And then what would happen to the story if the character was removed from the chapter? I guess I already talked about that. And then what does the story look like now? So this is the writing piece that we have. Okay, you need to take out a character. And then what is the story going to look like from there? So now you can have them do a written response around how the book changed, or you can have them rewrite the book, whatever you want to do. But this is a great little follow-up piece that gets them to that harder thinking. I'm connecting computer science and literacy. I'm getting them to read. I'm getting them to write. I'm getting them to talk to other kids, right? Lots of speaking and listening standards within there as well. So another great text that you can try out with your students to get those computer science and computational thinking pieces together. Anything to add for that one, Marisa?
No, you did awesome.
Okay. So thinking about planning instruction with computer science in mind. So we all have a lesson plan. If you don't have one on paper, you do have one in your brain, right? That you are constantly thinking about when you're developing lessons. So you as a teacher can also be thinking about computer science when you're developing a plan for instruction. So start, string, explore, loop, and end are all components of coding in computer science, right? So a start, you're going to choose your standard or your target or your objective. Your string, you're going to string together with content areas. You're going to match that vocabulary and make sure that you are getting the most bang for your buck. You're going to explore resources, texts, activity ideas, physical computing tools. I don't know, Marisa, can you drop that one pager in on all the computing tools that we have for loan? Heartland has a lot of tools out for loan that you can just get a hold of Marisa or any other instructional technologist, digital learning consultant, and we'll bring them out to you. So that Princess and the Pea one, Jeff Glade and I took to a first grade classroom and it was so exciting. We took that fourth grade lesson on that template to a fourth grade classroom and did that with the Indy cars. So lots of different resources. I think you saw Microbit listed on one slide. Hummingbird is on there. You can use whatever physical computing tools you have and integrate those as well. Then you're going to loop. This is the multiple exposures. This is a purposeful practice. I can't just teach it once. Where can I embed loops throughout the day, right? We have a loop. We have an algorithm for our day. We have a loop in our, special schedule. We have lots of different things. So any way you can embed that purposeful practice around these concepts and around these vocabulary words is going to be beneficial. And then the last one there is end explicit instruction and embed application. So now they know these things. How are you going to consistently have them apply their new knowledge, right? So this is a great way to think about how you can set up your lesson planning based on some of those computer science standards as well. Okay, action steps and share outs. So here's some of our favorites. I like to think about texts that we're already using in our classroom. And I picked 2 lower grades because I tend to get the most questions at the K2 level about how to integrate some computer science standards. So the Very Hungry Caterpillar, they're going through, on Monday he does this, on Tuesday he does this, on Wednesday he does this, right? And he goes through all this and he gets really, really, really big. And you can see it in the book. And then he goes into his cocoon and he turns into a butterfly, right? Well, we talked about at the K level, what if he didn't eat all that food? Because he got pretty big. Is that healthy for that caterpillar to eat that much? So we talked about, well, what could he not have eaten? And we had a lot of debate about which pieces this poor caterpillar could eat and not eat. And then they're like, well, if he eats bad, then you could die, because we've gone through that lesson in science about, the good food and the bad food for you. And it was such a great speaking and listening conversation with these students. And they talked about, the poor thing, well, let's let it, he needs to have fruit. Well, he needs to have vegetables. Well, he should take out the cupcake. Well, if he's not going to make it, then he should have the cupcake. All sorts of great conversations that these kids had about the poor thing that we could take out of the caterpillar's diet. And so we were abstracting, right? The doorbell rang is a great loop in if then, right? So they have all these cookies and then somebody rings the doorbell. So then they have to separate the cookies, right? They're dividing them out. So then the doorbell rings again. Now they have to divide again, right? So these are if then things. So you could code this story in a way. So you could read the story, what happens, what's the if then, what are the conditionals here? I get 3 cookies if nobody rings the doorbell. If somebody rings the doorbell, then I probably only get 2 cookies, right? So this is a great text that they can use. Marisa, did you want to talk about the other 2?
Yes, there's 2 other ones. My absolute one of my favorite books is You Can't Dance to These Rhythms, because I actually ended up finding it in my kids' school library. And what it is it provides I read it to a 2nd grade class. The word algorithm. Sometimes we think of that as a scary word and we don't know what that means. So we're not going to even try to teach it. So we can use the vocabulary words that we shared earlier, but then also go along with this book. And it says, our algorithm is just like in the post office. I deliver it in I put it in my mail into the mailbox, it then goes here, and then it goes here, and then it goes here. Or they even talked about a recipe. So it makes some very concrete examples of algorithms. Same thing about Nothing Loopy about this. Loops and conditionals, concrete examples, dance and dancing, and music. And then also there's another one, and I can't remember what the title is, but there's a 3-part series of that book, but definitely 2 books that I would highly encourage our libraries to have.
And these are kind of like the Hello Ruby books, right? Those are other good ones that we recommend, that you can use for lots of different reasons. These fall in that same kind of category. All right, what other books could you use for elementary students to integrate computer science? So in the chat, if you have texts that you use, we'd love for you to share those so that everybody can see what books you have that you might be using with your students, because we were at a conference here not too long ago, and the best part about the conference was hearing what other teachers are doing. So, if you're doing something great, call Marisa or email me and say, hey, I'm doing these things. Come see what I'm doing. I'd love to share with you. Or if you're all new to it, I am so new to this, I have no idea what I would even say. Get a hold of Marisa, get a hold of Janelle, or your instructional technologist, or your literacy consultant. And I'd go through Janelle and Marisa first, to be honest, but then we'd go from there. But we'll come out.
Heartland AA does have a computer science team, and Janelle is part of it as a literacy consultant. We also have Diane Royer as the math consultant, Ashley Delaney as our science and STEM consultant, and Angela Dvorak as our professional learning provider, and Tyler Hellman as another digital learning coach or consultant. So any of us can come out and bring these things to you. We have done, like Janelle shared, her and Jeff went out and did a lesson with the Indies. I've gone out with Indies. I've gone out and read that algorithms book and did a lesson during Hour of Code Week. So the support that comes from our team looks different depending on what you need in your district or what your students need. So we are open to any and all of that. I'm also a member of our Iowa computer science team. So anytime they're like, hey, I have a question on this, I often like, hey guys, through the whole state, it's like, hey, do you have some suggestions on this? So if we don't know the answer, we can either find somebody that does and connect you. Another person said they use Lego Mindstorms, and she's like, I use Lego Mindstorms in my class. How do I find out how they're aligning to the computer science standards? And I was like, hey, Aaron Maurer from Mississippi Ben, he designs those. So I was able to make those connections for them and try to be more efficient, work harder, not smarter. Wait, nope, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, we do have lots and lots of resources. So don't say, oh, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know. Get a hold of us. We'll work with you, make sure that, we work out something that works for your district, for your classroom, and go from there, because we do have access to lots and lots of resources and lots of people that might be doing the things already. All right.
Yes, I love those, Kathy.
Yeah, the STEM story packs, those are great. Yeah,
those are part of our library has those for checkout. If you're wondering what those are, our library has them from Barnes and Noble. You can check those out.
They are terrific. They're all put together for you. What was it, 2 years ago that we found those, Marisa? And it took us a year to get them in the library, but now everybody has access to them to check them out from the library. So if you want an easy place to start, that's actually a very easy place to start. Okay, action steps. What did you learn? What are you going to plan for, and how will you apply? So use the hashtag. Oh, what's the Heart of Innovation hashtag, Marisa?
HAEA Innovate.
HAEA Innovate.
If you just want to put it in the chat, what is something you learn? What will you plan, and how will you apply if you want to use the chat? Oh, there's a book. Yes, Kendrick Rox's Secret Code. So what's interesting is there's a we read that book. So one of us, since we didn't have 2 copies of the algorithm book, one teacher read the Roxas Secret Code, and then I read the algorithm book. And it was really interesting because they got to the same content, but they had 2 totally different examples of getting to the end of the lesson. And so I really loved that one, but I couldn't find it in hard copy. And so we had to split up and have each of us different books. We actually shared the video. I think it's of the author reading that book. So that's a good one. Thank you for sharing that.
Yay.
And now we go all the way down to probably 1st grade, maybe even kindergarten. We read it with a 2nd grade group.
All right. So we want to make sure that we have a couple other things on here. These are some of the resources that we came through from the CSTA. So CSTA is a Computer Science Teacher Association, and they had a national conference that we went to, and we learned so many things from other people. And here's a few that were on there. So Marisa, I think the barefoot one is the one you got to go to, and I was super jealous.
Well, actually getting to true CS integration workshop, that is like brain overload. That was a 3-hour workshop that I got to go to. And they shared barefoot as one of the examples. And the reason I gave you that link, I think it's out of the UK. You do have to sign up. It's free to be a part of it. But what it did, it has some really great lessons for integrating storytelling and some templates as well. But this is the link to the workshop I went to. They have K3 math and ELA lessons. So like the big green monster, they have a lesson on big green monster. So Janelle and I are like, oh my gosh, we should just read the book. Go away, big green monster. And I think that, yeah. So we were trying to already take their lesson and make it bigger or make it better by adding in some books into their lessons. But I think they went through and they actually talked a lot about computational thinking and computational skills. And so students went through and said, I use logic today. They spent a whole day, going through each one of these. And then the kids were self-assessing which one they used and creating some metacognition during their exit tickets. And this is a great way to integrate that vocabulary again. So we talked about that purposeful practice and having them do it over and over. This is a great way for them to reflect every day on some of those vocabulary words that are new to them. So, and then barefoot is one that they shared in there that had free lessons in math and science, or math and literacy, correct? Yes. Yep. Computational fairy tales. These are stories by level. This was one that I didn't know existed. And so this is the CS Detective is now available. But here's a list. Here's a list of fairy tales, and it tells you what they're about. If, else, that wasn't loops, switch, case, functions, variables, whole site devoted to fairy tales that have the computer science connections to them. So it was like, oh, great resource, free, love free, right? One of those, Janelle. Oh, sorry. What it looks like when you get into one. Yep. Well, binary, probably not one. Written right there in the blog. Yep. Here's the story. Yeah, great little resource. And then strategies for computer science content integration. Yes, I went to this one. I don't remember it. Oh, yeah, I know you have to look at the people, but lots of things in here. I always look through and try to figure out some of the, obviously this one's from Virginia. They had lots of, this is their kind of timeline. Our timeline's different than theirs. We learned that real quick too. But I always go through like the first 10 before you find what you really want, right? But it's talking about integration. So all the different things that are in there too. So another one to check out. All right. So I don't know if any of you are, say it again. We can skip that one because that's already passed. Okay. So questions. We want to make sure that we give you a little bit of time to ask some questions. Lots of things. I know some of you said, oh, I'm so new to this. I'm not sure. What did we stir up in your mind? What are you still questioning, or where do you want to go from here that we could probably help you out with? Drop it in the chat or unmute and ask us yourself. I think it might be maybe feels a little overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing anything. Where do I start? And I think, maybe you just share with us a book that you maybe want to purchase, or maybe you want to go check out from our library to just start with those books, or maybe I want to start with the vocabulary words. So even though we showed you, you know, very simple, just showing the vocabulary, reading a book, all the way to like, I'm going to do that book with a scratch lesson. So I guess, where do you see yourself entering this progression?
Yep. And I'm going to offer too, since there's only about a dozen of you in the course here in the session. Those of you that are live in the course, I know some of you that will be watching recorded later, but those of you that are live, if you want to put in the chat your school, I will send out a copy of that vocabulary flip book to you on the van.
Well, Karen, what district are you from? And then also, if you print you have the PDF. So you have access to the PDF, so you can print them yourself. If you want the AEA to do it, then we can do it for you.
Yep. So it's free if you print them. If you want the AEA to print them, it's like
Des Moines. Okay.
$.
So Karen, I will send you on the van a set of the vocabulary words.
Yep. And Kendra wants a set. Schuler Elementary at Waukee.
Oh my gosh. Don't end this, because then the chat will go away.
No.
Who else wants so Janelle will do
I can take care of both of them.
I will do the vocabulary. Tammy, the PDFs are in the links are in the slides. But yeah, let me know. You guys can always email me too. I don't know who wants the flip book and who wants the vocabulary book. So
I'm just gonna say I want all of them.
Okay.
And I can take care of ordering those and getting them out.
How do you get the slides? Tammy, I will send you, here's the link again to the slides. Janelle, are you gonna do both?
Yes, because I'll just put one order in and then get them done.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. I'm just writing everybody down so I don't miss. Christy, you said North Polk, but are you at Central? Are you at West? Are you at the middle school? And I can't even remember the name of the new school you got going out there. Is Karen still on with us? Yes, Karen.
Yes.
Oh no, Christy. Is Christy still on with us? There you are, middle school. Thank you, Christy. I don't want to send her to the wrong school. And the new one's Big Creek. Okay, good to know. Good to know.
So excited too. We have some Des Moines folks. I'm really excited. We always are always excited to work with some Des Moines folks, because they're not always the districts that we can get some PD to, because you're so large. So I'm so glad that you guys are joining us and finding these resources helpful. I also posted a link to we didn't share the slides that we used were what we had used for our one in Chicago. So we didn't share the physical computing because nobody can check it out if they're from Chicago. But there is a list of all the things that we have available for checkout. I know that Indies and our classroom set of microbits are not on there yet, but they just email us and we will bring those out. Most of the items on that document you can actually check out on your own. Anything but the expeditions, and that might be the only one. I think all the other ones you can check out on your own and have them just like you can check out a book from our Heartland catalog.
Emma, I see you're with Des Moines Public Schools. Can you tell me which building you want this sent to?
Yay, so many people from Des Moines. That's excited. Scott CO or SC Serprent. I can't remember his name. He's also working with us to help support you guys with computer science in your classrooms as well.
Yeah, Emma, if you drop in chat what building you're at, I'll get these on the van to you. Oh, a consultant to 3 schools. Sent to Walnut. Gotcha. Good to know. I will get them to you. Perfect. But again, you have the links, you have the PDFs. You can also go on Heartland and order them, or if you can't remember, just email Marisa and I. Our email addresses, I think, are on the first slide, or go to Heartland and find us. But we're happy to help. Would love to come into your classroom and see what you're doing and assist you with any integration needs that you may possibly have.